Hello, my sweet strangelings. Welcome to Mystic Mondays. Now, I've been telling you guys that I have the supernatural strange Sundays, and I also have metaphysical Mondays. Now, I do want to say that I've done a little bit off the cusp of, having the Quiet on Set episode with Gabby, and her and I have been talking to add on more of these podcast episodes. And I know that she wants us to have a guest on in the future. And I want to get your thoughts on this because I genuinely know that there's a variety of topics that we're covering on this podcast. And I know that for some, it can be overwhelming. I know some people love variety. I'm definitely someone that loves variety. And I want to show you that I have more complexity than just talking about ghosts and psychic stuff. But I do feel like sometimes true crime, unexplainable things are adjacent to the paranormal, even though I feel like most of the time there is a logical explanation to it. I know this is going to be an interesting and long introduction, but because I haven't been on in a week, I really wanted to add in this segment. And I just want to apologize for not making a podcast episode last week. Remember when I told you when I kicked off the season of this podcast that sometimes my neurodivergence takes me all over the place and I need to get on it. But also, I want to add in that my sister is going to go into labor. So I've also been preparing for that. And I just feel like since the solar eclipse, my emotions have been everywhere. My mind has been everywhere. And I'm just all over the place. But I'm kind of getting back into my cadence. Again, I just want to apologize for that. So thank you for being here listening to my podcast. I really appreciate you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. But with that being said, I'm just going to add in another thing. Let me know if you want me to do the true crime aspect. Um, I want to call it Murder Mondays because it is true crime. Now, when I say that, the true crime that I want to cover is more like scandal, society, things. I'm not trying to cover like Ted Bundy as an example. Even though I have talked about Ted Bundy on BuzzFeed when I worked with them and all that stuff. But let me know. I want to hear your thoughts. And without further ado, let's get on with today's episode. So currently, my sister is going into labor. And by the time that you listen to this, I anticipate that the baby will be here, hopefully. So yeah, exciting for new beginnings. So a couple of weeks back, I went to the Oman House. And I know it sounds like Omen, like Omen, but it's Oman, Oman. And this is going to be very important because this house has been on several paranormal reality TV shows. And you're probably wondering, well, what is the Oman House? Well, it's pretty interesting because I'm going to read to you verbatim what it says on the ocghostsandlegends.com. So in 1999, David Oman and his father purchased a nearby plot of land and built a house on it. Okay, there we go. My bad. Let me reread that. In 1999, David Oman and his father purchased a nearby plot of land and built a house on top of it on 10050 Cielo Drive. Now, this is not too far from where the murders took place of the Sharon Tate, also the Manson murders, whatever you want to call it. I do want to preface this by saying that Sharon Tate was a victim here, and it's very tragic with what happened to her and her family and her baby and stuff like that. So I tend to blame the victims rather than the sick people behind it, which was, Charles Manson and his cult. Since moving in, this is what it says. The Oman House has notoriously been known to be full of bizarre spirit activity. People come from afar and wide just to drive up the street of this infamous neighborhood. And the Oman House has been a subject of various network TV shows such as Ghost Adventures, Paranormal Witness, Ghost Hunters, My Ghost Story, and much, much more. So he also writes on here, I say he, but I don't know who wrote this. Someone wrote on there countless sightings of apparitions, disembodied voices, doors closing on their own, and objects falling. There's so many anomalies and shadows. So there's definitely recordings and EVPs, I believe, on David Oman's YouTube and I think the website. So this is not me just like off the curb of what I read on the website. And so it's really interesting because when I got the invite to go here, so I got invited for a media night with a +1, and I decided that I didn't really want to read too much into this place. Now, I took a quick glance of their Instagram page, and you can kind of see a couple of things here, which of course Sharon Tate and some of the Manson stuff did stood out, but I wasn't 100% sure what to expect with this. Because I really just wanted to like go there and see what I felt. And if anything that I felt correlated with anything prior, or anyone else had picked up on it. So the other thing I want to share with you guys is that I went on Reddit for this episode, and there's this username X Prish Preed X. Now this was done 7 years ago, and it's fascinating because I still feel like it resonates to some of the things that I experienced when I went. So this is what they wrote. I went to the ghost hunt last night. Did anyone go? I purposely did not watch any videos or shows about the house before I went so that it would be fresh to me. David is strange, but I didn't get a nutty vibe, more just high strung. He curses a lot, full of sarcasm, so on. My kind of person, really in small doses at least. I'm not a skeptic, but I haven't had any personal experiences, and I try to stay open as much as possible. But I didn't personally see or hear anything last night in that house that was convincing. We also got to explore the house next door. The only thing was I felt pressure in my head while I was inside both houses, but attribute that to the small spaces and being on a hillside. The seances, one in each house, didn't bring anything out. The meters were not moving at all during the seances, and the woman conducting the seance was full of shit, my opinion. She kept saying there was a dark energy preventing any spirits from coming out. There was some woman asked her to conjure up the spirit of the Vegas shooter and proceeded to yell at the Vegas shooter. It was really strange. The seance lady said he wasn't alone, but then after a long pause said she wouldn't want to bring up a negative energy into her life and refused to try to reach him. I guess he, quote, wasn't alone was an opinion and not a message. She made it sound like a message from beyond. Overall, I was really glad I got to go to the house. It was fun to explore, and I would go again. If you're into ghost hunting, it's a must. I'm sure there'll be another opportunity. If David is reading this, thank you for opening your house up for us to explore. So that was what they wrote on Reddit. So now I'm going to segue into my experience. So, as I said before, I got invited for a media night, and this was to experience a theatrical seance. And when we were on the main floor, which is when you knock, you get brought into like a dining room, kitchen area, there's a living room, and then there's another room that's kind of open, but it definitely is separated between the living room and all that. So, we watched a video in that room about all the people that had visited the Oman House. And you know what? I'm just going to say this. Like, I think you're right. David seems like a very high energy, very sarcastic person. And so when we started watching the videos, I felt like some of it, and I'm not saying this is David, I'm saying this is like the people that were shown on the clips. Some are very over exaggerative. And I know like it's reality TV. And David himself even mentioned that Ghost Adventures was really like not a good experience for him. Like he wasn't okay with some of the things that they touched base on. And according to him, allegedly, Zach did not stay that night there and did not film at the quote witching hour. So I like that he was able to point out some of the theatrics of this because reality TV shows can do that. But even some of the footage there, I was like, like other footage that was shown other than like Ghost Adventures. I was a little bit skeptical with that. Like there was this one footage of a woman who was like on the floor cradling what seems like a quote unquote ghost baby. And I watched this and I was like, interesting. And according to like David explaining this, she was a psychic medium. When I was watching it as an outsider, just like this is the introduction, and this woman's on the floor cradling like this invisible ghost baby. I was like, interesting. This is kind of uncomfortable. So anyway, we watched all this footage. All right, this is Stephanie from the future here. I wanted to chime in on a couple of things after editing this and re-listening to some of the stuff. I wanted to add in this other part. So David did show us, so amidst of all of the footage of the paranormal investigators that have been brought into his home to either just do an investigation or just do reality TV, there was a clip that he shared with us that he got on his own security footage. And I wanted to also preface this by saying that, he clearly has experiences on his own accord. It's not just clips from TV and other investigators, but there's this one clip that he showed us before we started the theatrical seance. So he was showing us in the theatrical room, which we'll get to here in a second, but he was sharing that footage. And he was basically downstairs looking towards the door, and he was next to this recliner chair, I want to say. And I guess, like, when he was looking away, the recliner propped open, as if to like lay down, like, when you sit on the recliner chair and you prop it open. So your feet are you're laying more like laying down rather than sitting. And it is shown moving on its own. I'll probably plug in that link here if I can find it in the description. But I remember when we watched that, yes, it was compelling for sure. But I do want to bring in the aspect of debunking and trying to find any reasoning to this. So my friend Sapphire, she looked at it and she told me that when she kind of like sat with it, she was like, I wonder if he wasn't realizing it, but you can see that his knee bends in a little bit, and I'm wondering if he might have touched it and not realized it, and that's what might have propped the recliner. I know that David mentioned that it's really hard to do that, so it's just something to consider if you watch the footage. Nonetheless, I think this is what makes very intriguing conversations around the paranormal, is trying to debunk things. And if you can't debunk it, then that just gives it more substantial evidence that in fact there was something unexplainable that did happen. So I'm only bringing this in to add in that perspective. Now, I think the evidence is compelling, but I can see where she's coming from as well, and I do appreciate that insight. But yeah, let's get back into what I was saying here in a second. And in that room, there was these dolls. So I want to say, if I remember correctly, I think in that room there was like an aquarium, and above the aquarium there's like these dolls. There's like all these like little nooks and crannies. And I remember when we first walked in there, I did feel like some energy there, but it wasn't enough for me to say it was like a haunting or something was living there. I did feel some imprint of energy there. I just wasn't sure what it was exactly. And I remember telling Sapphire this. So when we all evacuated that room and we were all like in the living room area, people went to the bathroom, people were finishing up some drinks. One of the doll figurines fell over, and he like got really excited and wanted us to go in there and like see that it fell over. And apparently this figure falls all the time. And later on, after this event, I did go on and watch Ghost Adventures, and that did happen on that episode. And I remember like in that episode, David was like jumping up and down, trying to like prove that like any movement like that shouldn't knock over the figurines. But I remember my friend Sapphire pointing out that like she wonders that if when people use a bathroom, if there's creating some type of like movement from the wall that creates these figurines to fall off. But, very curious to kind of like analyze that more at a later time. So then after this, we went out to the living room, like I said, and I did notice some of the artwork there. There was definitely like a Sharon Tate painting, or I think it was like a picture. And then there's all kinds of like other little things in the living room. There was like people that visited the place, people that David knew or knows. So overall, like it was pretty good ambience there, I would say. Nothing like out of place for sure, So then they laid out these like tarot cards by like what seemed like a bar, or what used to be a bar. And you're like supposed to pick up the tarot card because it's supposed to play like a role within the theatrical seance. And that's one thing too that I was just like, okay, this is kind of interesting. So we start up here, and then we're gonna be brought downstairs. And if I haven't said this before, I really did enjoy that like Sapphire was with me, because like I know that she's been on Ghost Town Terror on the Travel Channel. And even though she's like a believer, she'll definitely analyze and try to debunk and find some logic behind things, like the doll figurines falling off or falling off their little stands. She pointed out, like, could it be the bathroom or something like that? So anyway, we went downstairs to the second floor, And immediately, like, David was pointing out one of the rooms there where people have felt energy. He also took us down the hallway and he was like, yeah, do you feel the vibes or anything? I personally did not feel anything down there. And you guys know this, I talk about this on the podcast, like, I do psychic medium work. I felt something upstairs in that little area, but looking back on it now, I wonder if there's some type of imprint there. I don't know. But when we were on the second floor, like, did notice one of these like pictures that was ripped, and I was like, okay, I do feel something there, but I don't know. And I pointed out to David, and he's like, no, 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 it's the energy here. It's not that. I know what it is. I'm like, all right, all right. I mean, it's his house. I'm not going to try to like argue with him what I think is haunted because obviously he lives there. He knows more. I don't even think he knows that I'm a medium. So I was just like, whatever, dropping it because he seemed very adamant with like the hallway stuff. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Maybe I can discuss that with him at a later time. I don't know. But so I didn't really feel much there. And I remember that like he took us to both sides of the hallway and like Sapphire was like, okay, so if he's saying that, because he was talking about like David was talking about like a vibration in the hallway, and she's like, I wonder if there's a room there with like a fan or like a like a heater thing, I don't know, but that would create some type of feeling of a vibration. Because I think, and I'm not well versed with this, but I feel like whenever you have like some type of like the heater, like heating system, sometimes you'll hear some of like that slight vibration, I suppose, when it's running. I mean, it's tough to say. Again, like we were there with a bunch of people, and something just makes you think, right? So then we were brought down to the third floor, which is where they were going to do the theatrical seance. Okay, so before I mention the theatrical seance portion, I that week I had gone to the Queen Mary, and they also did a theatrical seance. And here's my thing with magic. So for the Queen Mary, I did a theatrical seance. I loved it. And when they pitched the theatrical seance at the Oman House, it was the idea that it was a media night. We would go and do a theatrical seance, and then we would do a mini investigation. Pointing this out is because when we got to the third floor, I noticed that there were some people drinking and stuff like that, which is, I have no issue with people drinking. I'm not really a drinker myself. I did feel some energy in that place, but I will say this, like, I think when people join a theatrical seance and they're already drinking, they're more likely to be open up and wanting to experience things and stuff like that. I have no issue with people drinking, but I'm very apprehensive doing any spiritual work, such as doing psychic readings, channeling with spirits, because when people drink, they open up themselves to a lot of things, and it's easy to be so heightened that you could either spook yourself out or think maybe your imagination is so out there that you think you're seeing some paranormal phenomenon. So personally for me, when I do my workshops, when I do investigations, I'm not much of a person that allows drinking in my workshops or at events like that. And it's fine if people do drink, but I've noticed some disasters with people drinking and paranormal phenomenon. I'm going to mention this one because it's fresh. So for New Year's, one of my friends, his birthday was around that time. I think he's like a New Year's baby. And we had a lady there. She was like a friend of, the birthday boy and my friend who is the wife of the birthday boy. And all of a sudden, I don't know, before I knew it, I was volunteered to do readings for people. And I'm like, you know what? I'll do readings, a few of them for today because it's New Year's and it's a great icebreaker. So I did a reading on this woman. She was drunk, okay? She was drunk. And I didn't say anything bad. I didn't say anything scary. I basically mentioned a photograph in her life that she was looking for and what it means to her and what her spirit guides want her to know. And she just lost it. She started crying so much. She took off before the strike of midnight and left her purse and her wallet. Now, I believe her boyfriend or whoever she was with was driving, but they wouldn't come back until like a week later for her stuff or something like that. And so what I'm saying is that, something like that can be so heightened. I just don't recommend it. Did it affect the night of the media night that they had going on at the Oman House? I don't think so. But also, I didn't really mingle with a lot of people there. I was mostly just there for the theatrical seance and to do a mini investigation with my husband and my friend Sapphire. So I don't know, but that's just something that, like, if you guys are going to be doing stuff like this and maybe you're new to it or you want to dabble into it, I'm not really for drinking. And we can definitely have more conversations on this at an earlier time, but I just don't want to ramble on about drinking and paranormal workshops and investigations. But that's just my thoughts. I remember my mentor, who was indigenous. That was one of the most common rules. One of the first things that she said to me on the night that I met her, the second time I saw her, was, do not drink and do this work. When I did my psychic development circles with my other mentor, Charles, same thing. Like, it's just not a thing. But yeah, that's just something I want to point out because I feel like it's been brought up or it's around these events. And I think that people should try to have a real authentic experience without their, mind being somewhat, under the influence. Because it just loses credibility to some aspect of it. That's just my thought. Anyway, it may not be a popular opinion, but wanted to add that in here. I really did enjoy the theatrical seance, but here's my thing with magic and like magicians and stuff like this. So I enjoyed going to the Queen Mary. I enjoyed the theatrical seance there, but then going like from that to this, it was just, I think, too close of a timeline that like by the time I did the theatrical seance at the Oman House, it just wasn't. I was just more like, okay, this is fun, but I'm not like super excited about it. I'm not like wowed by it. I did love the setup though, and I love the ambience to this one a little bit more than the one at the Queen Mary because the magician there, he had these really fun like seance dolls. I just really like the setup, and I love that we got to have a little bit more interaction. So like there was 4 people that got to sit on these high chairs, and we had these pendulums that we got to like swing back and forth, and it was part of the show and stuff like that. So I really liked that contrast versus the one at the Queen Mary. We all just sat in a circle. Like, yeah, there were some people that were called up to like be part of the experience, but it wasn't like a full interactive thing. So going back to forth from like the Queen Mary to this, I felt like, okay, I'm like, oh, this is fun, but I'm not like super wowed. And again, I think it's because I just had attended another show. And this also makes me think of like the Magic Castle in Hollywood, where I remember this one year I went for like sometime before Christmas. And then I got invited again. And this time I got to bring like my sister, my mom, and their kids for like Mother's Day. And they were super excited to go to this. But I was more of like, okay, I'm more enjoying their experience at the Magic Castle than the actual like performances there, just because I had just literally been there like a couple months back. So I think for me, I'm learning that I love magic shows, but I need to have some gap between the two. I don't know if you're like this, but if you are, let me know. Then anyway, so that happened, and afterwards we were brought to this room, and I don't know the full story of it, but I know that Ghost Adventures did touch some base on it, but I don't remember right now off the top of my head what it is. But I remember that we were brought to this one room where there's like some exposure to the elements. Like it's like, kind of like I would say like the crawl space of the house. I don't know. But there's like all this dirt there, and there wasn't really much lighting there. And I'm like a bug princess. So when we sat down in these chairs, I'm like, what is that? And like the guy that led us there, he's like, what is what? I'm like, there's like this big beetle there. What is that? And my friend Sapphire is like, oh my God. So she was more composed than I was. But I was like, I'm going to sit here and I'll go blindfolded, you guys. But I really don't want to because I now see this beetle by my chair. But I managed to like push that aside, sit down, and like be blindfolded for a little bit. And like the exercise was to do automatic writing for like a minute or so. I don't even know. And so we did, but I think we did it wrong. So it was just inconclusive. I'll maybe post pictures about it more on my Instagram later. Anyway, so after that, we went upstairs and people were like mingling, eating snacks and, having drinks. And I took it upon myself with Sapphire and my husband to like go downstairs again, go into the room that was next to the seance room, because apparently like that's one of their more like haunted rooms. And also, after I left that night and I watched Ghost Adventures, apparently they say that people felt like they've been dragged up the wall in this room. So obviously I'm going to go in there and like see what I feel. So anyway, when Sapphire and I walked in there and my husband, we decided that we were going to do like an Estes method. But one of my favorite things to do, since Carl and I are more like intuitives and stuff like that, and we cut this in Tombstone, Arizona. So we do this thing where we're blindfolded and the other individual will move around all the paranormal equipment like the K2 meters, the REM pods, the cat balls, anything that senses movement. So the other person will move it and not let the person that's blindfolded know where it is. So I was blindfolded, I was on the bed, and Carl and Sapphire were moving things around. And, we were like channeling the spirit or whatever. And I said, I told Carl and Sapphire while I was being blindfolded, I said, I feel a spirit. And Carl's like, where? I'm like, by the window. And he's like, what window? The small window or the big window? And he was kind of like trying to trick me because the big window was the sliding door. The small window was the window by the bathroom. And so I said the small window, and I didn't know it at the time, but apparently the K2 meter went off when I said that. So like that's one way for us to confirm that we are indeed like feeling the spirit there. We're communicating with the spirit there. So I think that was like one of the wow factors there that night. But then we did the Estes method, and it just kind of came off very confusing just because there was a lot going on. So at first we thought we were channeling this man there, and I'll post more footage on it later. And then later on, it felt like, because Sapphire and Carl did the Estes method, meaning that they were the ones that were like sensory deprived. And meanwhile, I was on the other side, like asking questions and stuff like that. I think it was Sapphire, Carl, and myself, maybe. I have to double check the footage. But the point of the matter, though, is that like we couldn't really figure out a theme there. Like at first, it felt like there was a man there. And it's interesting because like that's what they have said, like when I watched Ghost Adventures and like, looking back on it now. So I think that is one confirmation, but I feel like it's not enough for us to know what exactly is the full story in that space. I almost did feel like some spirits there that are connected to David, like they knew David at one point, but it was enough for me to know that there's more residual energy there. And usually like, I don't know, I felt more residual. I think there could have been an intelligent spirit there, but I would need to go back and like dig deeper, I suppose. What else do I want to say about this place? I think that's it. I mean, if I were to go back, I think I would go back into that room. And I think there was just so much going on, from like the theatrical seance to people walking around. I mean, at one point, David did knock on the door and disrupted the session. And it's not his fault. He didn't know. So yeah, I think that's it with my Oman experience. Now, next week, I will be going into my experience with the Vulture Culture Oddity Shop. So I just posted a video on Instagram about it. So make sure that you watch it if you haven't already, and let me know your thoughts on it. And I will try to do a Supernatural Strange Sunday episode where I'm reading your ghost stories. And if you haven't already, please write to me, shareyourspookystory@gmail.com. That's where I will be looking at all your stories and reading them for the podcast. And I think that wraps up this episode, because I'm literally in the room where my sister is supposed to have her baby any minute now. So if the audio is a little bit different, that is why. I do want to say, I'm going to give a shout out, because last week someone said that the audio was off. Thank you for that feedback. I really appreciate that. Anyway, so I'm going to end it here, you guys. I will talk to you guys next week. And remember to stay strange.